Hello, friends, and welcome to Escaping the Mouse with your host, me, Breck Roll. All right, we're going to do another episode of Bites and Nibbles with Breck today. Today, the recipe we're going to try is pizza Diavolo, and comes from our good friend Adrian Nigro, who sent this to me actually a few weeks ago. And I've been thinking it sounded really good, but I was a little bit concerned about it because there's some parts of this that I'm not 100% certain about. And actually, I'd planned to do this recipe last week and then ended up substituting the lasagna for it. So we're going to try it now, and I'm actually going to do something that I don't usually do on recipes. I'm actually going to alter the recipe the first time, because the thing that concerned me a little bit was the creation of the dough. One of the things that was of worry to me was the fact that the dough actually takes about 26 hours to prepare, and I was hoping to do something a little quicker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to substitute another pizza dough recipe, and then we'll just make the dough as it would normally be made. I think the results will be pretty much the same, and I'm looking forward to trying this, but I think this will be a lot simpler. What I will do is I will include both the original recipe and the pizza dough recipe that I am going to use for this particular version of the pizza. And you can try whichever one you want. But I'm going to try a pizza dough recipe that takes about 30 minutes to prepare. And I think that will yield at least simpler results in this case. So let's get going with pizza Diavolo. So these are the basic ingredients we're going to need to make our pizza Diavola. It's going to start off with some salt, all-purpose flour, some granulated sugar, olive oil, fresh tomatoes, jalapeno peppers, that's what attracted me to this, some fresh cut salami, and they actually say scamorza cheese, and I couldn't find scamorza cheese, but the cheese lady over at HEB says that a proper substitute for that is provolone, so I got a good aged provolone cheese that we're going to use in its place. There's going to be some garlic powder, some dried basil, yeast obviously for that, and some warm water. Now, one of the reasons I knew I was going to have to cycle back to this recipe at some point is because when I started buying supplies, one of the things I knew I needed was a pizza stone. I've never had a pizza stone before. Well, I have one now, so let's get going on this. So the first thing we're going to do is prepare the dough. And since that takes a little bit of time, it's got to rise and all that. The recipe also calls for doing a lot of this by hand. Well, I've got the power tool, so you know what? I've got a dough kneading attachment on my blender, and I'm just going to use that. So, the recipe says you can do that. It's just, I kind of prefer that over getting my hands all dirty. So let's get going on this. Now, one of the things I'm having to contend with on this recipe is that the recipe is entirely in metric. So I'm having to convert this all to American English standards. So, I'll include both the metric and the what they call imperial in the rest of the world standards when I post the recipe. So we're going to start off by mixing 1 cup of all-purpose flour and the rest of my dried ingredients. And what this is, it's a 1/4 teaspoon of basil, 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder, 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt, 1.5 teaspoons of sugar, and 1 packet of yeast, and that's about 2 1/4 teaspoons. And we're just going to get it in here, and we're going to mix it together with a wooden spoon, just to get it all kind of mixed up here. Now this is only a very small amount of our dough, of our flour. We'll be mixing more of that in as we go along. All right, next we're going to stir in 3/4 cup of warm water and 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Now it's very, very critical that you not go too hot on the water, otherwise you'll kill your yeast. So they recommend between 105 and 115 degrees. So I've got just kind of lukewarm water in here. This is going to be just about right. And we're just going to mix it all up until it kind of is nice and smooth. Nice smooth consistency. Let's get all the flour off the side of the pole here. That's a pretty nice smooth consistency there. So of course I'm a guy, like I'm breaking any news to you. So if I've got the power tools, I'm going to use the power tools whenever possible. And I got this nice KitchenAid mixer, so why not use it instead of getting my hands dirty? Also, since the next step is going to be to allow the dough to rise for about 30 minutes, one of the life hacks presented by the person who gave us this dough recipe was that she sometimes, since she lets her house be a little too cold for the dough to rise naturally, she'll preheat the oven and just let the dough sit on top of the range here, and there'll be just kind of natural warmth coming from the oven, and that will help the dough rise without it getting too hot. So what I've done, the recipe actually says preheat the oven to 230 degrees Celsius, and that comes out to about 450 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm letting the oven preheat at this point while we prepare the dough, because once the dough is prepared, we're going to want to have a nice warm oven to aid in the rising of the dough. I've attached the kneading attachment to my KitchenAid, and basically I'm just going to put it in there and let it spin at just kind of a slow speed. And I'm just going to probably spoon in some of the additional flour. I've got another 1.25 cups of flour here. Let's speed it up a little bit just to kind of get things going. And basically you just want to keep feeding in additional flour until it kind of becomes a little bit more solid and kind of begins pulling away from the edge of the bowl. And you'll probably end up using most, if not all, of the flour. Alright, so next we're going to take a clean bowl and we're just going to put a little bit of olive oil in it. Probably just a couple of tablespoons. Because basically what we want to do is we just want to coat the inside of the bowl with this. So I'm just going to use the basting brush. We're going to kind of go all the way around the sides here. Because what we're going to do is we're going to put our dough in here and we're just going to kind of circulate it around in here so that it's got a nice doughy, olive oil coating on the outside. Makes it a little easier to handle. And then we're just going to put our dough in here. Use my rubber scraper to get that all in there. And then I'm just going to use my wooden spoon here just to make sure we get it all kind of nice and coated all the way around the outside here. Like I said, this just makes it a little easier to handle. I'm going to get in there with my fingers a little bit now. I know I said I wasn't going to do that, but sometimes the best tool is the hand, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little plastic wrap over the top of it. And I'm just going to let it sit here on the oven now for about 30 minutes. So I'm going to turn the timer on for 30 minutes. Now the next step is we have to remove the skin and the seeds from our tomatoes. Now the recipe doesn't specifically tell you how many tomatoes to use, but since the tomatoes are just going to become the sauce, I'm guessing that it's all kind of just to your own kind of taste. And I picked four kind of medium-sized tomatoes. These are maybe the size of large plums. A lot of times tomatoes you find are the size of large apples. So since I wasn't really sure what the amount was, I chose like 4 of these tomatoes. As you can see, they're medium-sized. So I've been looking around trying to figure out how to get the skin off of it, and I found kind of an interesting kitchen hack. It's called tomato concasse. And basically what's going to happen is I'm going to remove the core from each of the tomatoes, and we're going to split them on the other side from the core, and then we're going to throw them into boiling water for about a minute. And supposedly what that does, it makes the skin become soft. Then when you throw those same tomatoes back into ice water, it stops the cooking immediately, and it makes it so the skin comes off really easy. So this is the first time I've tried that, so I'm very interested to see how this works. So like I said, the recipe just says kind of core the tomato with a paring knife. I don't have a paring knife, so I'm just going to use a steak knife. That works pretty well for me. Get that all out of there. And then it says make a crisscross cut on the flip side, because what that does then is it allows, as the skin begins peeling away, it allows something to tear. All right, so our water has started boiling, so I'm just going to drop my tomatoes in there. Like I said, this should only take a minute according to the recipe. Yeah, I think we're getting pretty close there. Drop that one in the ice. Leave it in there for a little bit. That one seems to be splitting pretty well, so let's throw that into the ice water. Like I said, that's supposed to stop the cooking almost immediately. Yeah, I think the rest of them are ready to go now. Into the ice water. And into the ice water. So as you can see, the tomato peels are just coming off real nice and easy on that. So that's a good idea. I'll have to remember this. So next thing we want to do now is we want to get all the seeds out of the middle, and they recommend that you cut it down the equator and then basically just scoop all the seeds and all the stuff out of it. They actually recommend you can do it with your fingers if you want, or you can have actually has been suggested that you can do it with like a teaspoon here. I'll actually cut some of this off here, because then it comes out easy, I think. So yeah, my dough has definitely risen in the last 30 minutes. There's a lot more of it. I kind of poked it in the middle just to kind of let the air out as per the recipe. And I think we're just going to let this sit for just a few more minutes. We're going to prepare our tomato sauce, and then we can flatten this out and begin making our pizza. So my recipe actually suggests that you mash this up and press it through the holes of a colander. Now that just seems a little ridiculous to me. And like I said, since I'm a guy, I got the food processor out. We're just going to do it that way. I think the point of the colander is then you end up filtering out any seeds you missed. But I think I got all the seeds out of there, so we should be okay. Now the recipe says you can add salt in here if you want to, just for flavoring. Personally, I love tomatoes just the way they are. So, you know, I'm not one that eats tomatoes with salt on them, and I think I'm just going to grind them up just the way they are, and I think they'll be perfect just like that. There's going to be plenty of flavor with the salami and with the provolone cheese and with the jalapenos. So, and away we go. And that's going to be our sauce. Yeah, that looks like that should be pretty good. So let's get going with the dough. Now, unfortunately, this part I'm going to have to do by hand. So I've got some flour. I'm just going to kind of spread it around on my on my cutting board here. And we're just going to start mixing the dough in here. Mixing it in really nice. Ah, yeah, we're starting to get good now here. Now they say at this point, if you're one of those people that can flip it into the air and do it like they do in the old pizzerias, you can do that. But I'm not going to do that. I think I'll just end up losing it on the floor if I do that. I don't want to do that. That would be really embarrassing for the vlog, right? Spend all this time getting ready and end up losing it on the floor. Yeah, that would be embarrassing. Next step, we're going to get my rolling pin out here. We're going to flour that just a little bit, and we're just going to start smoothing this thing out and try and turn it into something that looks like a pizza. Now, I got to admit, I'm probably not the best person at making these things perfectly round, but that's okay. We'll fake it. It's not going to taste bad because it's not perfectly round, right? Now what they recommend you do is just kind of peel the layers around here. We're going to just kind of fold up the edges here. That makes it kind of thicker around the edges. And also kind of helps you fake a little bit of the fact that it isn't perfectly round. You can kind of make it kind of round now a little bit. See, that looks a little bit sort of round. Next, we recommend a little bit more olive oil. Supposedly what this does, it kind of makes the crust a little crunchy. And we're just going to mix it around with our basting brush. Make sure we get it on the crust on the edge there too. You want to have that because you want your crust to be a little bit crispy. Now the next step they recommend, you're going to want to preheat your pizza stone here. So I'm just going to throw that in there and we'll let that heat up now for a few minutes. So while I'm waiting for the pizza stone to heat up, I'm going to begin slicing up the cheese. This is my provolone. I'm just going to cut it into big chunks because we're just going to kind of place it randomly on the pizza once we get the topping on. And I'm going to kind of do the same thing with the salami. I've just got stacked it up here into about 4 stacks here. We're going to use a lot of salami, so I'm guessing I'll use all of this. Now they had a choice, kind of mild salami or really spicy. Guess which one I chose? So what you'd normally do at this point is I need to transfer the dough onto the pizza stone, and normally what they have is what they call a pizza slider, which is basically a big giant metal spatula. I don't have one of those, so this part may get really ugly. We'll see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try setting the stone right here, and I'm going to try and drag the pizza dough onto it. Like I said, this might work, this might be really ugly. We're just going to figure it out as we go along here. Yeah, that could have been worse. And the stone's going to be really hot, so I'm not going to touch it at this point. Try and make it round again. Like I said, this would go a lot smoother if I had a pizza slider, but I don't, so this is what we're going to do. So next step, we're going to start by putting our sauce on. And I've just got my basting brush again. I'm just going to make sure we're coated all the way to the edges. This is why it doesn't really matter specifically how much of the tomato sauce you use, because you know what, I like a lot of sauce on my pizzas, so this will be good. And into the oven we go. For between 10 and 15 minutes. All right, let's bring it out and see what it looks like. Hot, hot, hot. Well, I gotta say, that looks pretty good. I'm gonna actually let it rest for a couple minutes here, and then we're gonna try it. All right, let's cut this thing up and see what it tastes like. That stone's still really hot, so I'm gonna be very careful with that. I was debating whether to cut it into 8 pieces or 12 pieces. I decided to go with 8. I don't think I could possibly eat 12. All right, taste test time. Now I gotta admit I cheated a little bit. A little bit of the salami came off when I was dishing it onto the plate, so I've already cheated a little bit and know a little bit what it tastes like, but it's pretty good. Mmm. Yeah, I do like it. And the dough is thick enough now that you can kind of pick it up and eat it like a traditional pizza. Yeah, really good all-around flavor. The provolone cheese is a good substitute. Like I said, I like the salami. The jalapenos are really nice. It's got a good tomatoey flavor from the sauce. I really wouldn't tweak on it a lot at all. You know, it's good just the way it is. You know, a lot of times when I do these recipes, I come back and say, okay, here's what I would do differently next time. This has got a nice bite to it, so you know, you may decide doing it the way I did it might be a little too much for you. But yeah, this is really good. You can always go with fewer jalapenos if you like. You can always go with mild salami rather than the really spicy stuff. When the guy in the deli was cutting it up for me, he gave me like some samples of it, so I knew kind of what I was getting into. But the flavor really comes out when you cook it, so This was a very, very good pizza. Can't complain at all. And I wouldn't really make any changes at all on it. So good call, Adrian. This was very good. Please send me your own recipes. The address is escapingthemouse@gmail.com. And that's all that I have for today. So thank you as always for watching. And I will see you next time on Escaping the Mouse. Bon appetit!